My name is Eric Thompson, and at 28 I never expected to be fighting for respect under my parents' roof. As a graphic designer, I pour creativity into every project, yet my parents see only wasted potential. When I lost my apartment and moved home temporarily, I hoped for support but found judgment instead. That fateful dinner conversation changed everything, setting me on an unexpected path to self-discovery. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if family drama hits close to home, and stick around to see how standing your ground can transform relationships forever. Moving back in with my parents was never part of my 5-year plan. At 28, I had built a life for myself in downtown Seattle, working remotely as a graphic designer for a small but growing agency. I loved my apartment with its large windows and perfect lighting for my creative work. Then came the letter informing all tenants that the building had been sold to developers who planned to convert it into luxury condos. We had 60 days to find new accommodations. The rental market in Seattle was brutal. Every affordable apartment had dozens of applications, and the places within my budget were either too far from the city or in questionable neighborhoods. After 3 weeks of frustrating searches and 5 rejected applications, I called my parents. "Of course you can stay with us while you figure things out, my mother," Patricia said warmly. "Your old room is just collecting dust anyway." My father James was equally welcoming on that initial phone call. "Son, that's what family is for. Stay as long as you need to get back on your feet." Their immediate acceptance gave me a sense of relief. I packed up my belongings, put some furniture in storage, and moved back to the suburban home where I grew up just outside the city. The house looked exactly as I remembered it from my childhood, the blue 2-story colonial, with white trim and my mother's carefully tended garden out front. The first week went smoothly. My parents seemed genuinely happy to have me home, and I made sure to express my gratitude daily. I set up my workstation in my old bedroom, transforming the space that once held posters of rock bands and sports teams into a functional home office. My dual monitors, graphics, tablet, and ergonomic chair looked strangely professional against the faded blue walls my mother had painted when I was 12. I offered to pay rent immediately, pulling out my checkbook the second night at dinner. "Don't be silly," my father waved it away. "Just save your money so you can find a good place sooner." I insisted on contributing in other ways, taking over lawn maintenance and helping with dinner preparation. I even fixed the leaky faucet in the downstairs bathroom that had been dripping for months. My mother seemed appreciative, but I caught the exchanged glances between my parents when they thought I wasn't looking. The subtle disapproval began during the second week. It started with innocent questions about my work schedule. "You just sit at that computer all day?" my father asked over breakfast. "When do you actually go to work?" I explained again that my position was fully remote, allowing me to work from anywhere with good internet. "The agency has a physical office downtown, but most of us work from home." He responded, his tone suggesting he considered this arrangement somehow less legitimate than commuting to an office. "In my day, people went to work. How does anyone know if you're actually working?" "By the quality of my output and meeting my deadlines," I explained patiently. "My team has virtual meetings throughout the day." My father, who had worked 35 years as a sales manager for a manufacturing company, clearly couldn't conceptualize a career without physical presence. He'd rise every morning at 5:30, don his suit, and commute 45 minutes each way. That was his definition of real work. My mother was more subtle in her commentary. "It must be nice to roll out of bed and be at work," she'd say with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "No need to even change out of pajamas." For the record, I always dressed professionally from the waist up for video meetings and usually wore proper clothes all day to maintain a work mindset. But explaining this to my mother seemed defensive, so I just smiled and nodded. My younger sister Abigail, who visited every Sunday for family dinner, was the only one who seemed to understand. At 25, she worked as a social media manager for a local business and faced similar misconceptions about digital careers. "Just ignore them," she advised when we had a moment alone. "They're from a different generation. Dad still prints his emails to read them." I laughed at that, grateful for her support, but the tension in the house was growing palpable. The space that held so many childhood memories now felt increasingly confining, as if the walls were closing in with each passing day. I found myself missing my apartment with an intensity that surprised me, not for the physical space, but for the freedom it represented. Even as the comments continued, I maintained my respect and gratitude. These were my parents, after all. They had raised me, put me through college, and opened their home to me in my time of need. I reminded myself that this was temporary, just until I found a new place to live. I could endure some old-fashioned perspectives for a few months. If only I had known then how quickly a few skeptical comments would evolve into something much more hurtful. If only I had recognized the early warning signs of the storm that was brewing. Perhaps I could have charted a different course, one that wouldn't lead to that fateful dinner that changed everything. 2 months passed with increasing friction in the Thompson household. I settled into a routine that revolved around my work, rising early to begin client projects by 7 in the morning. I took short breaks for meals, often eating at my desk to maintain my workflow. My position at the agency had become more demanding as we took on several new clients, which I viewed as positive career development. My parents saw it differently. Still, at that computer became my father's standard greeting when he'd pass my open bedroom door. His tone carried a mixture of disapproval and dismissal that stung more than I cared to admit. My attempts to establish boundaries fell on deaf ears. Once, during an important video call with a major potential client, my father walked into my room without knocking, asking loudly about a package delivery. I muted myself, quickly gestured to the camera, and whispered that I was in a meeting. He rolled his eyes and left without closing the door, forcing me to awkwardly rise from my chair mid-presentation to close it myself. When I mentioned this incident, later suggesting a closed door should indicate privacy, my mother jumped to his defense. "This is his house, Eric. You can't expect him to tiptoe around all day because you're doing your computer things." "They aren't computer things, Mom. They're client meetings worth thousands of dollars in contracts." She sighed in that particular way mothers do when they're trying not to say what they're really thinking. "If you had a normal office job like your cousin Brandon, you wouldn't have these problems." Ah, cousin Brandon, the golden standard in my parents' eyes. Brandon worked as a financial analyst for a large corporation, wore suits daily, and recently purchased his first home. His career path checked all the boxes my parents understood and respected. My creative profession, despite paying the bills and providing me with fulfilling work, somehow failed to register as legitimate. The comparisons became more frequent and less subtle. Brandon got another promotion, my mother would announce at dinner, giving me a meaningful look. Or Brandon's company provides excellent health insurance, my father would comment while reviewing his own insurance statements. I did my best to let these comments roll off my back. One evening, I shared some exciting news of my own at dinner. "I landed the Meridian project today," I announced, unable to contain my excitement. Meridian was a well-known outdoor apparel company, and securing their website redesign was a significant achievement for both me and the agency. "That's nice," my mother said, passing the potatoes. "Did you apply for any real jobs today?" The words hit like a physical blow. "This is a real job, Mom. This contract alone is worth more than 3 months of Brandon's salary." My father scoffed. "Until they decide they don't like your little drawings and cut you loose. There's no stability in what you do." "They're not little drawings, Dad. It's professional design work for established companies. I've been with the agency for 4 years without a single period of unemployment." "Still living paycheck to paycheck, though, aren't you?" he pressed. "Otherwise, you'd have had enough saved to find a new apartment by now." The conversation devolved from there, with my parents expressing increasing skepticism about my career choice. That night, I texted my childhood friend Marcus, who suggested we meet for drinks at our old hangout, a small pub not far from my parents' house. Marcus listened attentively as I vented my frustrations over a cold beer. The dim lighting and familiar atmosphere of the pub provided a brief respite from the tension at home. "You know you can crash at my place if things get too bad," Marcus offered. "The spare room isn't much, but it's yours if you need it." I was touched by his generosity but declined. "Thanks, but I should be able to find my own place soon. And despite everything, they are my parents. I don't want to damage our relationship by leaving on bad terms." "Just don't let them wear you down," Marcus advised, concern evident in his expression. "I've seen how your dad can be. Remember how he reacted when you chose art school over business college." I did remember. The current situation was starting to feel like a replay of that earlier conflict with my father's disappointment and my mother's passive-aggressive support of his position. Some things never changed. The following weeks saw the tension escalate further. My parents began referring to me as dead weight when speaking to relatives on the phone loud enough for me to hear from my room. Yes, Eric is still here. No job prospects yet. Just does his computer stuff all day. The irony was that my career was actually thriving. I had taken on additional projects to accelerate my savings, working late into the evening after my parents had gone to bed. The Meridian project was going exceptionally well, with the client requesting additional services beyond the initial scope. But none of this registered with my parents, who seemed determined to view my work as nothing more than an extended hobby. Despite their increasing disrespect, I continued to help around the house. I updated their ancient Wi-Fi router when it failed, spent an entire Sunday setting up their new smart television, and even created a digital system to organize my mother's extensive recipe collection. Each task was met with momentary appreciation, followed quickly by resumed criticism of my career choice. I intensified my apartment search, checking listings daily, and scheduling viewings whenever possible. The Seattle market remained challenging, with affordable options either being snatched up immediately or requiring significant compromises in terms of location or quality. Still, I was determined to regain my independence, even if it meant a longer commute or a smaller space than I'd had before. As the third month of my stay began, I felt increasingly like a stranger in my childhood home. My professional identity, which I had built through years of education and hard work, was being systematically dismantled by the people who should have been my biggest supporters. Something had to give, and soon. I just didn't expect the breaking point to come so dramatically, or to change the course of my life so completely. The evening that changed everything began like any other Tuesday at the Thompson household. I had been working since dawn on a tight deadline for the Meridian project, finalizing the responsive design elements for their mobile interface. The work was intricate and demanding, requiring my complete focus, which is why I lost track of time. When I finally emerged from my room, the aroma of my mother's lasagna filled the house. It was 6:45, 15 minutes past our usual dinner time. My father and mother were already seated at the dining table, their expressions making it clear that my tardiness was yet another transgression to add to my growing list of shortcomings. "Nice of you to join us," my mother said, her voice carrying that particular edge I'd come to recognize. "I was about to put your portion in the refrigerator." "Sorry," I said genuinely. "I was finishing something important for a client." "More important than family dinner?" my father asked, not looking up from his plate. I took my seat at the table, the same spot I'd occupied throughout my childhood. "The deadline is tomorrow morning, and there were some last-minute changes requested by the client." My father took a deliberate bite of lasagna, chewed thoroughly, and swallowed before responding. "Speaking of tomorrow, your mother and I want to discuss something with you." The serious tone immediately put me on alert. I served myself a portion of lasagna and waited. "You've been here almost 3 months now," he continued, placing his fork down with precision. "When you first moved back, we agreed this would be temporary while you got back on your feet." "I'm actively looking for apartments," I said defensively. "The market is tough right now." "That's not the only issue," my mother interjected. "We feel that perhaps we've been too accommodating, and it's not helping you take your situation seriously." My father nodded in agreement. "Starting next month, you'll need to pay rent if you want to stay here." The statement hung in the air like a physical presence. I carefully placed my fork down, my appetite suddenly gone. "Okay," I said slowly. "That seems fair. How much are you thinking?" $800 per month, my father stated firmly, plus 1/3 of the utilities. The figure was deliberately high, I knew immediately. Not quite market rate for a room in Seattle, but substantial enough to make a significant dent in my savings efforts. It would extend my timeline for moving out by several months. "Maybe it'll teach you some respect," my mother added, her tone suggesting she was doing me a favor. "Help you understand the real world a little better." The real world. As if I hadn't been living in it, supporting myself completely for the past 6 years before my temporary setback. "I've offered to pay rent since the beginning," I reminded them. "You refused." That was before we realized how comfortable you were getting my father countered. Sleeping late, staying in your room all day with your computer games. They're not games, I said, feeling my composure starting to slip. It's professional design work. I've explained this repeatedly. Whatever you call it, my father dismissed with a wave of his hand. It doesn't seem to be getting you anywhere. Your cousin Brandon was promoted to senior analyst last week. There it was again. Brandon, the measuring stick by which my own success would always fall short. I respect that this is your house, I said carefully, and I'm willing to pay rent. But I'd appreciate if you'd respect that my career is legitimate, even if it's different from what you understand. My mother's laugh held no humor. Respect is earned, Eric. Right now you're just dead weight around here. The term hit me like ice water. It wasn't the first time I'd heard them use it, but hearing it directed to my face crossed a line. Dead weight, I repeated, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. Is that really how you see me? Well, what would you call it? My father challenged. 28 years old and back in your childhood bedroom playing with pictures on a computer all day. I call it a professional going through a temporary housing transition while maintaining full employment, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I call it a son who thought his parents might be supportive during a difficult time. Don't get dramatic, my mother sighed. We're being supportive by giving you a reality check. This artistic hobby of yours isn't a career path. It's not a hobby, I said, feeling something break inside me. I have a degree in graphic design. I've been with the same agency for 4 years. I just secured a contract with Meridian that's worth more than Dad makes in a quarter. My father's face reddened. Now you're just making things up to sound important. My younger sister Abigail, who had been silently watching this exchange, finally spoke up. Actually, Dad Eric is really successful in his field. I follow his agency's work and they're well respected. Stay out of this, Abigail, my mother snapped. You don't understand the real world either, with your Facebook job. It's not a Facebook job, Abigail protested. I manage comprehensive social media marketing campaigns. Enough, my father interrupted. The point is, Eric, if you want to continue living here, you'll pay rent starting next month. $800 due on the 1st, and we expect you to start looking for a stable position. I looked between my parents, these people who had raised me, who had once supported my interests and dreams. Now they sat across from me as strangers, unable or unwilling to see the adult I had become. In that moment, something crystallized within me, a certainty that this situation would never improve as long as I remained under their roof. I understand, I said quietly, rising from my chair. If you'll excuse me, I need some air. I left the dining room with as much dignity as I could muster, ignoring my mother's comment about my uneaten dinner. In my bedroom, I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding in my chest. The decision that had been forming subconsciously for weeks suddenly became clear. That night, after my parents had gone to bed, I began packing methodically. Clothes, essential personal items, and most importantly, my work equipment. I worked silently, efficiently, like a man with purpose rather than one fleeing in defeat. By 3 in the morning, my car was loaded with everything I truly needed. The furniture and non-essentials could wait. On my desk, I left a note. Mom and Dad, I've decided to remove the dead weight from your home. Thank you for the temporary shelter, but I cannot stay where my work and choices are so fundamentally disrespected. I'll be in touch once I'm settled. Eric. I took one last look around the room that had witnessed my childhood dreams and recent humiliations alike. Then I walked out quietly, closing the front door behind me. As I drove away in the pre-dawn darkness, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: grief for the relationship I'd lost, anxiety about the uncertain future, but predominantly a surprising sense of liberation. The break had been made. There was no going back now, only forward into whatever came next. The pale light of dawn was breaking over Seattle as I arrived at Marcus's apartment building. I had texted him just before leaving my parents' house, asking if his offer of temporary lodging was still available. His immediate response, "Get your ass over here. Doors unlocked," provided the first genuine smile I'd experienced in days. Marcus was waiting in his doorway when I trudged up the stairs, a duffel bag over my shoulder and laptop case clutched protectively against my chest. He took one look at my face and pulled me into a bear hug. "Damn, they really did a number on you, didn't they?" he said, stepping back to help me with my bags. You could say that I replied, exhaustion suddenly hitting me like a physical weight. "Thanks for this, man. It won't be for long." "Stay as long as you need," Marcus insisted, showing me to his spare room. The space was small but clean, with a futon desk and small dresser. "It's not the Ritz, but there's Wi-Fi, and no one will call you dead weight." Those 2 words were enough to bring the painful dinner conversation flooding back. I sat heavily on the futon, dropping my head into my hands. "Want to talk about it?" Marcus asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Not yet," I answered truthfully. "I need to sleep, then work. I still have a deadline this morning." Marcus nodded, understanding without further explanation. "Get some rest. We'll figure out the rest later." I managed 3 hours of fitful sleep before my internal alarm jerked me awake. The Meridian project deadline loomed, and professional responsibility outweighed personal crisis. I set up my laptop on the small desk, connected to Marcus's Wi-Fi, and dove back into the work I'd abandoned the night before. By noon, I had submitted the completed project and received enthusiastic approval from the client. The professional victory provided a small counterbalance to the emotional defeat of the previous night. I was still a valuable designer, even if my own parents couldn't see it. My phone remained off. I wasn't ready to deal with whatever messages might be waiting from my family. Instead, I focused on immediate practical concerns: finding permanent housing, retrieving my remaining belongings, and maintaining my work productivity, despite the upheaval. Marcus returned from his job as a physical therapist that evening with takeout food and a sympathetic ear. Over containers of Chinese food, I finally recounted the full story of the dinner confrontation and my midnight departure. "I'm sorry it came to this," Marcus said when I finished. "But honestly, I think you made the right call. That situation was toxic." "They're still my parents," I said, feeling a complicated swirl of emotions. "I keep wondering if I overreacted." "Eric, they called you dead weight to your face after undermining your career for months. That's not just a misunderstanding, that's straight-up disrespect." Hearing someone else frame it so bluntly helped solidify my resolve. I hadn't overreacted. I had finally set a boundary that should have been established much earlier. The next morning, I began apartment hunting in earnest. My budget was tight, especially without the financial cushion I'd hoped to build while staying with my parents. But the urgency of my situation provided clarity about priorities. I needed a place that would accommodate my work setup and was within reasonable distance of potential in-person client meetings. Everything else was negotiable. After 2 days of intensive searching and 4 disappointing viewings, I found a small studio apartment in a converted industrial building on the outskirts of the Capitol Hill neighborhood. The space was minimal: a single room with exposed brick walls, tall windows, and a tiny kitchenette, plus a bathroom that could generously be described as compact. But the rent was within my budget, and the building offered secure entry and reliable internet, an essential requirement for my work. "I'll take it," I told the property manager without hesitation, signing the lease on the spot and providing the security deposit from my savings. "You can move in immediately," she informed me, handing over the keys. "Previous tenant left 2 weeks ago." That night, I finally turned on my phone. The notification screen filled immediately with missed calls and text messages. Most were from my mother, their tone evolving from annoyed "Eric, this is childish behavior," to concerned, "Please just let us know you're safe," to increasingly panicked, "We're considering calling the police if we don't hear from. Are you soon?" There were also several messages from Abigail. "They found your note this morning. Dad is furious. Mom is crying. What happened? Are you okay? Please text me back, even if you don't want to talk to them. They went into your room and freaked out when they saw your computer stuff was gone. I think they finally realized you were serious. It's been 3 days. They're actually worried now. Mom keeps saying she didn't think you'd really leave." I texted Abigail, "First, I'm safe. Found an apartment. We'll call you tomorrow." To my mother, I sent only "I am safe and have secured housing. We'll be in touch about retrieving my remaining belongings." Then I turned the phone off again, not ready for the inevitable responses. The next day, I moved my few possessions from Marcus's spare room to my new apartment. The space echoed with emptiness, containing only my work equipment, clothes, and personal items I'd managed to pack that night. No furniture, no decorations, nothing that made a space feel like home. But it was mine, paid for with my own money, free from judgment and criticism. I set up my workstation, first creating a functional office space in one corner. I would sleep on an air mattress until I could afford proper furniture. The physical discomfort seemed a small price to pay for the psychological comfort of independence. That first night alone in my new apartment was a study in contradictions. I felt both intensely lonely and profoundly peaceful. The silence, uninterrupted by passive-aggressive comments or disapproving sighs, was like a balm to my worn nerves. I worked late into the night, catching up on projects that had suffered during the emotional turmoil of the past week. 6 days after my departure, my phone rang with my father's number. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Eric." His voice sounded different, smaller somehow. "Yes." I kept my response neutral, uncertain where this conversation might lead. "Your room is empty," he said, as if this was a surprising discovery. "All your things are gone." "I took what I needed that night," I explained. "I'll arrange to get the rest soon." "You really moved out," he stated, the realization apparently just sinking in. "Where are you staying?" "I found an apartment. I'm fine." A long pause followed, filled with unspoken words on both sides. Finally, he asked, "Why didn't you say anything? Why just leave in the middle of the night?" The question ignited a spark of anger I thought I'd moved past. "I tried talking to you and Mom for weeks. You weren't listening. You made it clear what you thought of me and my career. We were just trying to motivate you," he said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "By calling me dead weight. By dismissing my profession as a hobby. That's not motivation, Dad. That's disrespect." Another silence, longer this time. In the background, I could hear my mother asking questions, her voice tinged with anxiety. "Your mother wants to know if you're coming home," he finally said. "No," I answered firmly. "I'm not. This is my home now." The line went quiet again, and I realized this might be the first time my father had ever heard me set a boundary with such conviction. After a moment, he sighed. "We should talk about this, face to face." I considered the request. Part of me wanted to refuse to protect the fragile independence I'd just established, but another part recognized that a clean break wasn't possible or perhaps even desirable with family. "Not yet," I decided. "I need some time. I'll contact you when I'm ready." After ending the call, I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the unfamiliar view of my new neighborhood. Below, people moved about their evening routines, each carrying their own complicated relationships and private struggles. I was just one among many navigating the difficult terrain between family obligation and self-respect. My phone buzzed with a text from "Abigail heard you talk to Dad. They're in shock. I think they finally get that you're serious." I typed back, "I am serious. This isn't a tantrum or negotiation tactic." Her response came quickly, "I know. I'm proud of you. Want me to bring some of your stuff this weekend?" For the first time in days, I felt a genuine smile form. "Yes, and thanks for understanding." "Always," she replied. "Some of us respect graphic designers around here." That small exchange of support provided more comfort than I could express. Standing in my nearly empty apartment, I felt something shifting inside me, a growing certainty that despite the difficulty of the path I'd chosen, it was unquestionably the right one. 1 month after my abrupt departure from my parents' home, my studio apartment was beginning to feel like my own space. I'd acquired a bed frame and mattress from a going-out-of-business sale, found a serviceable couch on a neighborhood-by-nothing group, and splurged on a proper desk and chair for my work area. The apartment was sparsely furnished by conventional standards, but it contained everything I needed to live and work effectively. More importantly, my professional life was flourishing in ways I hadn't anticipated. Without the constant undercurrent of criticism and judgment, my creativity flowed more freely. I found myself taking more risks with designs, pushing boundaries that I'd previously approached cautiously. The results spoke for themselves. "This is exactly what we were looking for," the marketing director from Meridian enthused during our follow-up meeting. "The responsiveness of the mobile interface is seamless, and the visual identity system perfectly captures our brand evolution." The success of the Meridian project led directly to 2 referrals, high-profile clients who had seen my work and specifically requested me for their projects. My supervisor at the agency was thrilled. "Whatever you're doing differently, keep it up," she told me during our weekly video check-in. "Your recent work has been exceptional. We're considering you for team lead on the Next-Gen account if you're interested." The Next-Gen account was the largest in our agency's portfolio, a tech startup with substantial venture capital backing. Team lead would mean a significant pay increase and greater creative control. I accepted immediately. "Fantastic," she responded. "There's just one thing we'd need. Some of the client meetings would require in-person attendance. Would that be an issue?" "Not at all," I assured her, silently celebrating this development. The additional income would accelerate my plans to properly furnish my apartment and rebuild my savings. That weekend, Abigail visited my new place for the first time, bringing another box of my belongings she'd rescued from our parents' house. "Wow," she said, looking around the studio. "It's small, but it suits you somehow." "Thanks," I think I laughed, taking the box from her. "Coffee." As we sat at my small kitchen counter, I filled her in on my professional successes of the past month. Her genuine enthusiasm was a stark contrast to what I'd grown accustomed to from our parents. "That's amazing, Eric. The Next-Gen account is huge. I've seen their ads everywhere lately." "How are Mom and Dad?" I asked, the question I'd been avoiding since she arrived. Abigail's expression shifted, struggling honestly. "They didn't realize how much you were doing around the house. The lawn looks terrible. Dad can't figure out the smart television settings you programmed, and Mom's printer keeps jamming." I felt a twinge of satisfaction at this news, followed immediately by guilt for the feeling. "They've called me several times," I admitted. "I've been responding with texts, but I'm not ready for a longer conversation yet." "I get it," Abigail assured me. "They were way out of line, but I think they're starting to realize it. Mom actually defended your career to Aunt Susan last week." This surprised me. "Really? What happened?" "Aunt Susan made some comment about you playing on computers instead of getting a real job, and Mom actually corrected her. Said you were a professional designer with important clients." The information created conflicting emotions. Part of me was gratified to hear my mother finally acknowledging the legitimacy of my career. Another part felt frustrated that it took my complete departure to achieve this basic recognition. "They want to visit your apartment," Abigail continued cautiously. "Mom keeps asking for your address." "I'm not ready for that," I said firmly. "Maybe we can meet somewhere neutral first." Abigail nodded, understanding without judgment. "Just let me know when you're ready. They're not handling this well, but I think they genuinely miss you." After she left, I received an unexpected LinkedIn message from Thomas Farrow, a business associate of my father's whom I'd met at family functions over the years. "Eric, I was recently at a conference where Meridian unveiled their new website and brand refresh. When they credited the design work to your agency and specifically mentioned your name, I was impressed to make the connection. Your father always spoke of your computer work, but I had no idea you were creating at this level. If you're interested, my company is looking to update our digital presence. Could we discuss?" The message represented an unexpected intersection of my personal and professional worlds. Thomas's company was in the same manufacturing sector as my father's firm, though more progressive in their approach to digital marketing. The opportunity was too valuable to pass up for personal reasons. We arranged a coffee meeting for the following week. Thomas was straightforward and professional, treating me with the respect of a valued consultant rather than his colleague's son. "Your portfolio is impressive," he said after reviewing my work samples, "particularly your e-commerce solutions. That's a primary area we're looking to strengthen." We discussed his company's needs, potential approaches, and budget considerations. By the end of our meeting, I had a new client and a substantial contract that would further cement my financial independence. "I mentioned to your father that we were meeting," Thomas said as we were parting. He seemed surprised. "We're not in close contact at the moment," I explained diplomatically. Thomas nodded without pressing for details. "Well, I'm glad to be working with you. Your talent speaks for itself." That evening, my phone lit up with a call from my mother. It was the third attempt in 2 days. This time I answered. Eric. Her voice sounded tentative, unlike her usual confident tone. Hi, Mom. Thomas Farrow told your father about your meeting today. He said his company is hiring you for design work. That's right, I confirmed. It's a significant project. I don't understand, she said, emotion creeping into her voice. Why would you work with your father's colleagues but not speak to us? It's a professional relationship, Mom. I'm not avoiding Dad's industry, I'm avoiding the disrespect I experienced in your home. We never meant to disrespect you, she protested. We were concerned about your future. By calling my profession a hobby. By comparing me constantly to Brandon. By calling me dead weight. Her sharp intake of breath was audible. We didn't mean that literally. Words matter, Mom. So does tone, context, and consistent undermining. It all adds up. The line went quiet for a moment before she spoke again, her voice smaller. Your room is still empty. When are you coming home? The question revealed how fundamentally she misunderstood the situation. I am home, Mom. This is my apartment, my space, my independent life. I'm not coming back to live with you and Dad. But why is your room empty? She asked, confusion evident in her tone. Where are all your things? Abigail has been helping me move them gradually. I took the essentials that first night. Another silence, longer this time. I didn't think you'd really leave, she finally said. I thought you were just making a point. I was making a point, I responded. And the point was serious enough to act on. Will you at least meet with us? She asked. Your father and I want to talk to you in person. I considered the request. Nearly a month had passed, enough time for initial reactions to settle and perspective to develop on both sides. Okay, I agreed. But not at the house. Let's meet at Westlake Coffee downtown Saturday at 11. We'll be there, she promised, relief evident in her voice. After ending the call, I sat at my work desk, staring at the Meridian project displayed on my monitor. The design that had been dismissed as computer stuff at my parents' dinner table was now bringing me professional recognition, new clients, and financial security. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Your mother says we're meeting Saturday. I look forward to it. The formal tone was typical of his text messages, offering no hint of his actual thoughts or feelings. For a moment I wondered if the meeting was premature, if enough had really changed to make it worthwhile. But avoiding them indefinitely wasn't the answer either. Saturday would be a starting point for better or worse. The atmosphere inside Westlake Coffee carried the pleasant aroma of fresh espresso and baked goods, providing a comforting backdrop for what promised to be an uncomfortable conversation. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a table in the corner that offered some privacy while remaining in a public space. I ordered a latte and waited, reviewing potential talking points in my mind, as if preparing for a difficult client meeting. My parents arrived precisely at 11, my father's punctuality being one of his few predictable traits. They scanned the coffee shop anxiously before spotting me in the corner. My mother's face lit up with a smile that seemed genuinely relieved, while my father maintained his usual reserved expression. They looked somehow smaller than I remembered, or perhaps I was seeing them differently now. Eric, my mother said warmly, reaching for a hug which I returned somewhat stiffly. You look well. You've lost weight, my father observed, extending his hand for a formal handshake. I've been busy, I replied, gesturing for them to sit. Would you like to order first? Once they had returned with their drinks, an awkward silence descended on our table. Each of us seemed reluctant to initiate the difficult conversation ahead. Your apartment, my mother finally began. Abigail says it's nice, but very small. It's a studio, I confirmed, but it has everything I need, including excellent natural light for my work. Where is it located, my father asked. Capitol Hill area, I said, deliberately vague. I wasn't ready to share my exact address yet. That must be expensive, he commented, his tone suggesting financial irresponsibility on my part. I can afford it, I stated firmly, especially with my recent promotion and new clients. My mother leaned forward eagerly. Abigail mentioned something about a promotion. What exactly does that mean in your line of work? The genuine curiosity in her question represented a small but significant shift from her previous dismissive attitude. I've been made team lead on our largest account, I explained. It comes with a substantial raise and more creative control. I'm also taking on independent clients outside the agency, like Thomas Farrow's company. Thomas was very impressed with your work, my father admitted, surprising me with this direct acknowledgement. He showed me the proposal you prepared for their website redesign. It was quite professional. Coming from him, this qualified as effusive praise. Why did you leave without talking to us first? My mother asked abruptly, her eyes glistening. Do you know how worried we were? I took a deep breath, reminding myself to remain calm and clear. I did talk to you, repeatedly. You weren't listening. We were listening, my father countered. We just disagreed with your choices. Disagreement is fine, I said. Disrespect is not. Calling someone's profession, a hobby, or computer games isn't disagreement, it's dismissal. We were concerned, my mother insisted. Living at home at 28 isn't normal. I was there temporarily because my building was sold. I reminded them. I was actively looking for new housing while working full-time. None of that warranted the level of criticism I received. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Perhaps we were a bit harsh. A bit, I repeated incredulously. You called me dead weight to my face. After weeks of belittling my career, comparing me unfavorably to Brandon and treating me like a failure. My mother flinched at the reminder. We didn't mean it like that. How else could you mean it, I asked. Words have meaning, Mom, and yours were crystal clear. A tense silence fell over our table. My father stared into his coffee, as if it might contain answers, while my mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. We want you to come home, she said, finally. That's not going to happen, I replied gently, but firmly. I have my own place now. I'm building my independent life. Without us, my father stated flatly. That depends entirely on you, I countered. I'm not cutting you out of my life. I'm establishing boundaries about how I deserve to be treated. I reached into my messenger bag and pulled out my tablet, opening a digital portfolio I'd prepared specifically for this meeting. I want to show you something, I said, placing the tablet between them. This is the work you dismissed as computer games and little drawings. The portfolio displayed my recent projects, including the Meridian website mobile app interfaces for several well-known brands and digital marketing materials that had significantly increased client conversion rates. Each project included client testimonials and performance metrics. This last slide shows my income growth over the past 3 years, I explained, moving to the final image. As you can see, my career is not only stable but growing consistently. The dip you see in April was when I had to move out of my apartment and deal with the stress of living in an unsupportive environment. My father studied the charts with the attention he typically reserved for his own business reports. These numbers are accurate, he asked, his tone shifting from skeptical to surprised. They're taken directly from my tax returns and contract values, I confirmed. I make more now than cousin Brandon, by the way. Not that it should matter. My mother's expression had transformed from defensive to contemplative as she swiped back through the portfolio. These are really beautiful, she admitted, pausing on a brand identity system I'd created for an organic food company. I had no idea this was what you do. That's the problem, I said quietly. You never asked. You assumed. My father cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Your mother and I have discussed things, and we realize we may have been unfair in our assessment of your situation. Coming from him, this qualified as a profound apology. We'd like you to come back home, my mother added quickly. No rent, no criticism, we promise. I shook my head. I appreciate the offer, but that's not possible. I've signed a lease, set up my workspace, and established my independence. Going backward isn't an option. Then, what do you want from us? My father asked, frustration edging into his voice. Respect, I answered simply. Recognition that my choices and career are valid even if they're different from what you understand or would choose for me. I want a relationship between adults, not a continuous judgment session. My mother reached across the table to touch my hand. We do respect you, Eric. We're proud of you. We just showed it poorly. Very poorly, I agreed, but returned her gesture with a slight squeeze of her hand. It's going to take time to rebuild trust. "What happens now?" my father asked, ever the pragmatist, seeking concrete next steps. "Now we start over," I suggested, "with clear boundaries and mutual respect. I'd like to have a relationship with you both, but it has to be one that acknowledges who I actually am, not who you wish I was." "And who are you?" he asked, the question surprisingly genuine. "I'm a successful graphic designer who loves his work. I'm independent, responsible, and good at what I do. I'm your son, but I'm also my own person, with my own path." My father nodded slowly, seeming to truly see me perhaps for the first time since I'd chosen art school over the business degree he'd preferred. "There's something else you should know," I added, deciding to lay all cards on the table. "The company I'm doing design work for, Thomas Farrow. They're direct competitors with your firm in the digital space. They're implementing strategies your company has been resistant to adopting." My father's eyebrows rose in surprise. Thomas didn't mention that part. "Because he recognizes good business strategy when he sees it," I replied without apology. "His company is growing while yours is struggling to adapt to changing market conditions." Rather than the defensive response I expected, my father appeared thoughtful. "Perhaps we should discuss this further. Your perspective might be valuable." This concession, the acknowledgement that I might have professional insights worth considering, represented a seismic shift in our relationship. "I'd be happy to share my thoughts," I offered, professionally. As our meeting drew to a close, the tension that had dominated the initial conversation had transformed into something more complex, a tentative bridge being constructed between my parents' traditional expectations and my actual reality. "Will you come for dinner next Sunday?" my mother asked hopefully. "Just dinner, no pressure, no criticism." I considered the invitation. "Yes," I decided, "but I'll drive myself and I'll leave when I'm ready to leave." Of course, she agreed quickly. "Whatever makes you comfortable." As we stood to depart, my father did something unexpected. He extended his hand, not for another formal handshake, but holding a business card. "This is ridiculous," he said gruffly, giving my son my business card. "But perhaps we could discuss some of those digital strategies you mentioned, professionally." I accepted the card, recognizing it as his version of an olive branch. I'd like that. Outside the coffee shop, we parted with tentative hugs and promises to talk soon. As I watched them walk to their car, I felt neither triumph nor lingering anger, but rather a quiet hope that perhaps we had found the beginning of a new, more authentic relationship built on mutual respect rather than expectation and obligation. 6 months after our coffee shop meeting, my studio apartment had transformed into a comfortable home that reflected both my personal aesthetic and professional identity. The exposed brick walls now displayed framed prints of my favorite design projects alongside photographs of meaningful moments. The summit of Mount Rainier I'd hiked with Marcus, a candid shot of Abigail, laughing during a surprise, birthday dinner I'd organized for her, and yes, even a family photo taken at Thanksgiving. My design business had flourished beyond my most optimistic projections. The promotion to team lead at the agency had come with additional responsibilities that challenged and engaged me creatively. Meanwhile, my independent client list had grown to the point where I was considering a difficult but exciting decision whether to remain with the agency or establish my own design studio. The most profound transformations, however, had occurred in my family relationships. The Sunday dinner that followed our coffee shop meeting had been awkward but civil, with my parents consciously avoiding commentary on my career or living situation. The second dinner went more smoothly, with my father actually asking questions about a project I was working on. By the third monthly dinner, my mother had proudly displayed the new business cards I'd designed for her small baking side business, telling her friend on the phone, "My son, the designer, created these. Aren't they professional looking?" These small steps gradually rebuilt what had been broken, not into its original form, the parent-child dynamic where they directed, and I complied, was gone forever, but into something new, a relationship between adults who shared blood and history, but respected each other's separate paths. "I'm hosting dinner this Sunday," I told my parents during our weekly phone call, a practice we'd established to maintain regular communication, at my apartment. "I'd like you both to come." There was a brief pause before my mother responded enthusiastically, We'd love to. Can we bring anything? Just yourselves, I assured her, and an open mind. My apartment, while small, had been arranged to accommodate dining for 4 comfortably. I'd spent the day preparing a meal that reflected my newfound independence, simple but thoughtfully executed recipes that demonstrated both practical skill and personal care. When my parents arrived, accompanied by Abigail, their reaction to my space was telling. "This is actually quite nice," my father commented, examining the efficient layout and personalized touches. "You've done a lot with limited square footage." "I'm impressed with your organization," my mother added, noticing how my work area was separated from living space by a cleverly positioned bookshelf. "It feels much larger than I expected." During dinner, conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years, touching on family news, current events, and yes, my recent professional accomplishments. My father mentioned a meeting he'd had with his company's board where he'd presented some of the digital marketing strategies we'd discussed during our professional consultations. They were resistant at first, he admitted, but the numbers made a compelling case. "We're implementing the first phase next quarter." "That's fantastic," I responded, genuinely pleased by his willingness to adapt. The market's shifting so quickly that adaptability is becoming the primary competitive advantage. "I've been learning that," he acknowledged. "From you, primarily." The simple admission that he had learned something valuable from me represented a profound evolution in our relationship. After dinner, as we enjoyed coffee and the apple pie my mother had insisted on bringing, despite my assurances that I had dessert covered, she broached the subject that had gone unmentioned for months. "I want to apologize," she said, setting down her fork. "Properly apologize for how your father and I treated you when you were staying with us." My father nodded in agreement. "We were wrong," he added the words clearly difficult for him to pronounce. "About your career, about you. We were so focused on what we thought success should look like that we couldn't see you had already achieved it, just on a different path," my mother continued. "Calling you dead weight was inexcusable." It was, I agreed, not softening the truth for their comfort. It hurt deeply coming from the people who should have been my strongest supporters. "We understand that now," my father said, "and we're trying to do better." "You are doing better," I acknowledged. "We all are." Abigail raised her coffee cup in a small toast. "To doing better," she offered. We all clinked cups, the simple gesture symbolizing agreement to the ongoing work of rebuilding our family bonds on healthier foundations. Later, after my parents and sister had departed, I stood at my apartment window looking out at the city lights. The journey from that painful dinner to this moment of reconciliation had been neither straight nor easy. There had been difficult conversations, setbacks, moments of doubt about whether the relationship could truly be salvaged. But standing there in the quiet of my own space, I felt a sense of peace that had once seemed unattainable. The greatest lesson I'd learned wasn't about family dynamics or even self-respect, though those were significant. The most profound understanding was that meaningful relationships require both boundaries and bridges. You need the courage to establish what treatment you will not accept, but also the wisdom to build pathways back to connection when genuine change occurs. My career continued to advance, bringing financial security and creative fulfillment. 3 months after our dinner, I made the decision to launch my own design studio, maintaining my role at the agency part-time while building my independent client base. My father, in a gesture that spoke volumes about our transformed relationship, offered to review my business plan and provided valuable insights from his years of management experience. My mother, who had once dismissed my work as computer games, now proudly shared my professional website with friends and family, introducing me as my son, the entrepreneur, with genuine pride in her voice. The journey from that fateful dinner to my current reality had been transformative, not because I'd proven them wrong, but because we'd all grown in our understanding of respect, recognition, and the many valid paths a successful life can take. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and your family is to walk away not in anger or permanent rejection, but as a clear statement that certain treatment is unacceptable. The space created by that boundary can become the foundation for something new, something healthier, more authentic, and ultimately more loving than what existed before. Standing in my apartment that evening, surrounded by the life I had built through my own efforts and choices, I felt gratitude for both the painful catalyst that had forced change and the willingness of my family to evolve with me. We would never return to the past with its hierarchical relationship and unquestioned authority. Instead, we had created something more valuable, a family of equals bound by love and respect rather than obligation and expectation. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with people you love? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more authentic life journeys. Remember that sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most meaningful growth. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it brings some perspective or comfort if you're facing similar challenges in your own relationships.